Let me introduce myself a little bit. I'm Paul Hunkar. I'm Director of Certification Compliance for the OPC Foundation. I run the certification program for the foundation. I'm also a consultant. I've been working on OPC related stuff for a very long time. So let's get started. I think first thing I want to talk about a little bit is the fact that we had a pre-conference session yesterday. So there's a lot of topics that we're not going to talk about today because we talked about them in the pre-conference. It's recorded. You guys will be able to see it if you want afterwards. But let's summarize what we covered about. So we talked about why certification is important to start with. We went through, what certification provides and why it's out there. We then described the OPC Foundation Certification Program. We went through test case definitions, tools, the automated tools we have for checking applications, manual testing too. We described interoperability events that the foundation provides that lets vendors get together to test their applications with other vendors. And then finally, we described the formal testing program that we have, and including the details of what's in the formal testing program. So we went through, what do we test, how it gets tested. So basically a lot of details on what our certification program is. We also yesterday went through, if you want to test a product, how do you go about it? What would you need to do? So we provide almost all our information on the website. We provided information about it. We described the fact that testing is related to profiles and conformance units. So again, we described that and showed you where to find information. The profiling tools also provide the test case information. That was a question that got asked after yesterday's session. So profile tools do include links to all the test cases. We have automated test cases, and we went through how that runs. Our compliance test tool, or CTT, which, by the way, you'll hear some more about later today yet. So our session today is primarily going to be about what's new and what we're planning. We also described manual test cases. We went through how to actually apply for certification. So that's the 2-minute summary of what we covered yesterday for a much longer session when we worked through all the details. And today what we're going to talk about is the actual new features or new items that we're planning in the future and what we're going through, what's just recently released. Alex will give you some tidbits on, and then I'm going to describe more of the plans on it. So let's get into that and actually look at it a little bit. So what are some of our new targets? Where are we going? As Jim described, the release process is being updated. We have already for 104, we have quite a few amendments and quite a few updates. And we're working on making sure the certification program handles that and deals with it, right? So we're going to see new models, new companion specs, new information models for companion specs. We're seeing new communications protocols such as PubSub, and we're working through building the infrastructure and providing all the capabilities we need to do that testing. The PubSub testing is still in progress. It's a little bit longer term goal for us just because it requires new communications paradigms for our compliance test tool. It isn't just adding test cases. We have to add a fair amount of infrastructure for it. We have a lot of companion specs. Later on today, you'll hear more about that. I think Wolfgang's presentation talks about some of that, but you will have a great deal more there that we have to provide testing for. I want to talk about a couple of the companion specs that are coming out. Mostly because these are ones that are mandating certification. So OPC does not mandate certification for its existing specs. Sometimes we wish we had, but we don't. What we are seeing, though, is that there are a number of other groups that do require certification. So OPAS is one of them. They're working on an open process automation solution. The reason I want to mention this, besides the fact that they mandate certification, is that they also are doing more than just OPC UA communication in their model. They have an information model. They have other features involved. And it's a growing trend that people would like to see one-stop certification. So we're working with them, actively working with that organization to ensure that a vendor can bring a product to a lab and hopefully get most of their testing done at one lab, so they don't have to go to 3 or 4 labs for different aspects of testing. So we're trying to work out how that'll all be handled. We're also working with the FLC group. That is an OPC group, but they are for FLC mandating certification. So if you're going to implement FLC, you will have to have it certified. There's information model components for FLC, which we're of course going to be testing. But the bigger issue with FLC is FLC will, although not initially, but will have TSN aspects to it. And the one-stop shopping for TSN is a bigger discussion issue, since TSN testing includes physical layer testing, not just software testing or firmware testing. It actually requires testing hardware. And we're trying to sort out how all that happens and how all that gets done. This is in discussion. It's certainly not resolved at this point, but I'm giving you a preview of what we're working on. So the FLC piece will have a bit of work for us to sort out. That said, what else is new? We're very steadily adding new features, mostly due to all the amendments in 104. We're still working on 104 testing. We have started already figuring out some 105 features. We do typically figure out what versions or what things to add testing for based on what we see as demand for the features and functionality. So, you know, if someone implements, if we see a lot of people implementing something such as alias names, we move it up in the priority list to make sure that even though it's a new amendment, we include testing for it much sooner, since we're seeing implementations for it. With that said, we're always looking for more people. Defining test cases, it requires work. So the compliance working group that's responsible for managing all the testing and defining all the test cases and ensuring that the testing is appropriately done is always looking for new members that can help us either review the test cases or define new test cases. So if any of you are interested, please send Alex or I an email, or you can even send an email to compliance at OPC Foundation, and we'll gladly add you to. All corporate members are welcome to join our compliance working group. With that said, I'm going to turn it over to Alex. Alexander's our director of the OPC Foundation's certification lab in Europe. He will continue with what's a little bit nearer term versus further out functionality. Alex?
Yep, thanks, Paul. So yes, I'm going to start with the new test cases that we just recently released, and that basically recently means here they have been released yesterday. So yesterday we added additional client conformance units on behalf of client testing, but also we enhanced several test cases for clients, because what we noticed is that some of those test cases were very difficult to understand for not OPC UA experts. So we did enhance the description a bit to make it easier for vendors and their testers to understand the goal of the test as well as how to execute them. But we didn't only update or make updates to the client side, we also updated the server side. So we do have updates to the history access test cases, as well as alarming conditions. And because we just recently noticed interoperability problems for multidimensional arrays, we also introduced new test cases that are actually checking that multidimensional arrays are correctly being handled. So having that said, we also do have a new release of the compliance test tool, and the test tool is available for the 103 version and the 104 version of the specification. And for those versions, we did add a lot of new features. So we did add aggregate testing, for example, but also as security is a very important part in OPC UA, we introduced auditing testing as well as enhanced the certificate validation for application instance certificates and user tokens. So we really give that a high priority to ensure that all the products that are being tested and that are being certified are meeting that high security standard of OPC UA. Then we did enhance the handling for embedded devices. That basically means that we are handling devices which are having a very limited address space with just a few nodes or with only readable nodes way better now. That basically allows us to, or we did reduce the number of false negatives here tremendously. So if you are testing your own embedded device, that should really help you to update to the new version. Then, as I already mentioned, multidimensional arrays, we did define new test cases, and obviously also we integrated them into the compliance test tool, and that gives us trust that all the interoperability issues that were there will be gone in the near future. We introduced subscription transfer and subscription durable. And also, this is the first time that we are natively adding companion specification scripts, in this case for PLC Open, thanks to Stefan here. That basically allows us to, or allows all the licensees, all the users of the compliance test tool, the CTT, to automatically test the correct integration of the PLC Open companion specification. Now, they do not have been the first one that have released test scripts. There are already test scripts available, for example, MDIS, which is from the oil and gas industry, for more than 1.5 years. But there are also some more on the way, but they were the first one that are now natively integrated and shipped to all the vendors. So having that said about what we just released, what is planned for the future or for the close future. So with the next release, we are going to focus on alarming. So alarming will be in the next release, which is scheduled for the 3rd quarter. And also we are already working on the PubSub, as Paul already mentioned. That requires a lot of work also for defining the test cases. So this takes some more time. And obviously we are always working with different companion groups on introducing new test scripts for companion information models. I'm going to talk about that a bit later in this presentation as well. So something that we are very frequently asked is how can, or what does the CTT actually test and how can it be used? So we just learned what has been introduced, and now I want to provide you some more information about the 2 different modes the CTT can be used in. So we do have server testing, in which case the compliance test tool is actually acting as a normal UA client. So that is a script-based client which is sending valid and invalid requests to the server and ensuring that the server is behaving according to the specification. Now, the beauty with that is because there's nothing in between, we can automate a whole lot of those test cases that are defined for it. So the CTT runs more than 1,000 test scripts just for validating a UA server, and there are always more added. The second mode is for client testing, and client testing, unfortunately, is a bit more difficult. The reason for that is that the OPC UA specification requires certain behavior in the application itself. So an automated test rule cannot determine whether the client behaved correctly by just injecting a certain problem. So what the compliance test tool does here is it acts as a man in the middle. It allows you to observe the communication flow between a client and a server, and it also allows to inject certain error codes or scenarios. So for example, removing all the results of a read request. And then somebody needs to check on the client side whether the client crashed or if the client correctly discards the message and if there's a trace entry and so on. So that is unfortunately a manual check here. But the CTT has been developed with the idea to make it easier for the vendors. So all the testing should be as easy as possible and as smooth as possible. And because of that, we actually have an automation interface for the CTT. So what that allows you to do is running the CTT in your CI or built-in environment. So the CTT comes with a command line interface, which allows you to run single test scripts or a bigger set of test scripts. And with doing that, you can basically take a look or integrate that into your build system. And if a developer checks in a fix and you do a build overnight, you can automatically test with the CTT whether your product is still behaving correctly or the fix actually broke something else. The results are provided on one hand, of course, as a return code, which is easy for the integration. But if you're using multiple scripts to be run at once, so basically a full CTT test run, you would need to parse the XML file, which provides you all the information about the results. Now, all of that is being documented and installed with the compliance test tool. So you have all of that offline available, but there are also some guides on YouTube available, which are a bit older, but the concept is still the same. So all of them are still valid. So in order to make the CTT even more valuable for the users of the CTT also allows to extend itself. So what you can do is you can create your own test scripts for your own product scenarios that you want to cover. And that basically allows you to use the CTT as a testing framework and ensure that specific behavior is working fine. And you can do that by integrating your own test scripts, your own conformance units, and to extend the CTT settings with your own configuration objects, for example, instances of certain type objects. And now the presentation is gone. Just give me a second. I'll fire it back up. There we go. Yeah, the beauty here now is that this is not only allowing vendors to extend the CTT, but it also allows companion groups to do that. So when a companion specification is being released, they can actually add testing for that and integrate that in the compliance test tool. And that is what I'm going to tell you a bit more about now, because that really eases the job of the vendors and the testing, because the behavior is generic, that is defined in the companion specs, and therefore it can be automatically tested. So what the OPC Foundation provides here is guidance for the testing and certification rules. So there is a presentation from the compliance working group that is available. It also has been recorded, but we're also very happy to provide this information to any group that is interested. We provide guidance for defining the test cases, best practices, a test case template. So all of that is being provided not just to the companion groups, but also to particularly vendors that are really wanting to extend the CTT with their own testing. So we are very happy to help here. What we also provide is help with the initial development with the test scripts and the CTT integration, so that all the test scripts that are being developed for companion specification are being natively integrated in the CTT and are distributed to everybody who has a copy of the CTT, so you can automatically test that for your own product. We help the maintenance and the extension of those test scripts to really ensure that you have a uniform test framework to test everything that is regarding OPC UA with one tool. So there is very much no reason to not do that. And if a companion group that you integrate in your product didn't do that yet, you can always send them up to us, and we are very happy to help them to get this done so you can ease your own testing. Now, to cover one question that we are frequently asked is whether after running and passing the compliance test tool, which automates a lot of the tests, am I fully compliant with the OPC UA specification? And unfortunately, there is a limit that the compliance test tool can do. So what the test tool can do is it can validate core functionality or functionality that is defined in the OPC specifications, like the OPC services. It can check defined behavior from the UA spec, the address space. It can also be extended, just like I explained, for companion specifications with testing information model, which is defined there, or defined behavior from companion specifications. But the limit is with underlying data sources. So we also do have a lot of manual test cases. And the reason for that is that in certain scenarios, the OPC specification requires certain behavior that we cannot enforce with the tool. For example, the indication of a connection status to a data source. So speaking of an RFID reader, which has an external antenna, if the connection is being broken or intermitted, then we basically expect that the values that are related to that antenna are going to a bad status code. Same is the case for a gateway where the underlying device basically goes away. And that is stuff because we cannot break the connection with the CTT that you need to test manually. So on behalf of all the certification information, all of that is online and available. So please check out the certification portal, which is on the opcfoundation.org certification. We do have a list of certified products publicly available. Check out the interoperability, the IOP workshops, where all the vendors are getting together for testing the interoperability of their products. That is always something that I can highly encourage. The compliance test tool is also available online, and the test cases are all online in the profile reporting tool as well. And with that, I hope that you got a good idea about the CTT and the certification in general. And thank you for the attention.